Chapter 1. What I thought I saw the first time, I was certain it was a mistake. This is important to establish. I was not a person who believed in doubles, in doppelgangers, in the folklore of the second self. I was 31 years old, a copywriter, pragmatic by temperament, without particular investment in anything that could not be photographed or measured. I had grown up in a household of engineers and had inherited their worldview intact. The world is the world, things are what they are, and when something appears to be impossible, the correct response is to look for the error in your observation rather than the exception to the rule. So when I saw myself standing on the other side of a glass door in a shopping center in November, my first response was not fear. It was correction. I had been in the shopping center for approximately 40 minutes, doing the unremarkable errands of a Tuesday afternoon. I was coming out of a chain pharmacy carrying a paper bag and thinking about whether I needed to stop at the supermarket before going home, and I pushed through a set of glass double doors and looked up, and there was a person standing on the other side of the doors looking back at me. A person my height. My build. My coat, the specific dark green wax jacket I had owned for 4 years, distinctive enough that I had once had a stranger compliment it at a bus stop. My hair. My face. Looking at me. The moment lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Then the door swung closed between us, and by the time I pushed through again, the corridor beyond was empty. I stood in the corridor for a moment. I told myself. A person who resembles you. Coincidence of clothing. Bad lighting, reflective glass, a half-second of confusion between reflection and reality. These things happen. I walked to the car park. I drove home. I made dinner. I thought about it all evening and I told no one. Chapter 2, the second time was 3 weeks later. I had, in the intervening 3 weeks, thought about the shopping center incident more than I was comfortable admitting. Not obsessively, I had not reorganized my life around it, had not made it the subject of research or investigation. But it was there, in the way that unexplained things are there. Occupying a specific position in my awareness, a small and persistent weight. The second time, there was no possibility of misidentification. I was on a commuter train. A weekday morning, 7:45, the specific crowded quiet of a full carriage of people in transit. I had a window seat and was reading on my phone, half attended, the train's motion the background of my awareness. At the station before my stop, the doors opened and people got on and people got off, and in the movement of bodies I happened to look up. Standard behavior, the automatic tracking of motion. And I saw myself get on the train. Not a resemblance. Not the ambiguous maybe of the shopping center. Myself, exactly, without qualification. The same face, and I mean precisely this, not a face that resembled mine but mine, the specific arrangement of features that I see in mirrors and photographs and that I recognize as me in the way you recognize your own name. Same face, same hair, same coat, the green jacket again, which I happened to be wearing. The version of me that boarded the train moved down the aisle. It did not look at me. Its eyes moved across the seats in the way of a person looking for a space, and I watched those eyes move over me, over my face, my seat, me, without the flicker of recognition that a person has when they see their own face. It found a seat 4 rows away, on the same side of the carriage. It sat down. It looked at its phone. I spent the remaining 6 minutes of the journey unable to move, unable to think clearly, watching the back of its head. The specific shape of the back of its head, which I know from photographs, the slight asymmetry in the hairline that I have always been aware of. It got off at my stop. I let it exit first. I followed at a distance. It went left at the top of the stairs. I went left. It went along the high street. I went along the high street. It went into the building where I worked. I stood on the pavement for a long time. Then I went in. It was not in the lobby. It was not at my desk. It was not anywhere I could see. I asked a colleague if anyone had come in asking for me. She said no. I sat at my desk for the rest of the day and did very little work. Chapter 3, What I did instead of telling anyone. I didn't tell anyone for 4 months. This requires some explanation, because the obvious question is, why not? You have seen something that you cannot explain, that frightens you, that has happened twice now with increasing specificity. Why not tell someone? The honest answer is, I knew what telling someone would sound like. I have a friend, I'll call him Marcus, who is a GP. I imagined telling Marcus. I ran the conversation in my head several times in those 4 months. The specific quality of attention that Marcus would give it. Careful, non-judgmental, the clinical attention of a doctor hearing a symptom. And the direction that attention would lead. The questions about sleep, about stress, about whether I had been experiencing anything else unusual. The careful, kind suggestion that what I had seen might have an explanation that did not require a second version of me. And the thing was, he wouldn't be wrong. The explanation existed. Stress-induced misperception, the mind's tendency to project familiar faces onto ambiguous stimuli. I know about this. It's documented. It's real. But I had been on the train for 6 minutes watching the back of its head. I had watched the specific asymmetry in its hairline for 6 minutes. And I had not been particularly stressed at the time. I had been having a fairly ordinary week. So I sat with it. I kept it to myself. I wrote it down. I have always kept a journal, a habit from university, and I wrote the shopping center incident and the train incident in detail on the days they happened and then did not write about them again for 4 months. I watched. I was careful. I looked, in the way you look after something like this, at reflections and at people who might be me, with a specific quality of attention that I had not had before. I did not see it again. For 4 months, nothing. And I began, very carefully, to believe that Marcus's explanation was the right one. That I had been tired, that the brain does these things, that I was fine. And then it was spring, and I was in a coffee shop around the corner from my flat, and the person at the table by the window was me. Chapter 4, the coffee shop. This time I sat down. Not at the same table, at the table adjacent, with a single empty table between us. I ordered a coffee I did not drink. I opened my laptop. I looked at the screen. I watched it from the corner of my eye for 40 minutes. It was reading. A physical book, held in both hands, the spine cracked back in the way I hold books, the way that damages spines and which I do despite knowing better, a habit I have had since adolescence. The specific angle of the hold, the way the left thumb rested on the lower page corner. It turned pages. It occasionally looked up, out the window, at no particular point of focus, the way you look up when you have read a sentence that requires a moment of processing before continuing. I know this look because I have noticed it in myself, in the reflection of train windows, and here it was across 2 tables. Once, it looked directly at me. For a moment that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, we were looking at each other across the coffee shop. Its expression was neutral. Not surprised, not alarmed, not the expression of a person who has just seen their own face on a stranger. Neutral in the specific way of someone who has glanced at another person and registered them as present but irrelevant. Then it looked back at its book. I sat for another 10 minutes. My coffee went cold. I did not speak to it. I did not approach it. I paid and left. I walked around the corner to my flat. I sat on the sofa. I called Marcus. I need to tell you something, I said. He listened for 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. How long has this been happening? He asked. Since November, I said. Another pause. The careful, non-judgmental quality of his silence. I want you to come in, he said. Not as a patient, as a friend. I want to have a proper conversation about this. I'm not experiencing anything else, I said. No other symptoms. No sleep problems, no mood changes. I'm not stressed. I'm not depressed. I paused. I am fine. Except for this. I believe you, he said. And then, after a moment. That's actually why I want you to come in. Chapter 5, Marcus. I went to see Marcus the following week, at his house rather than his surgery. He made tea. He had the kind of home that suggested a person who reads seriously, books everywhere, organized not decoratively but usably, the specific arrangement of someone who returns to books rather than displaying them. He asked me to go through the 3 incidents in detail. I did. He asked good questions. About the lighting, about my state of mind before each incident, about the duration of each observation, about what the other, he used this word carefully, the other, had been doing. When I finished, he sat with it for a moment. The standard explanations, he said. I've been through them, I said. I know. But let me do it properly. He counted them on his fingers. Stress-induced facial misidentification. Hypnagogia, but you say you were fully awake each time, which I believe. Erotropsia, perceptual distortion under certain lighting conditions, but the coffee shop was well lit. Fregally delusion, the fixed belief that different people are actually the same person, but that's the wrong direction. You're not seeing the same face on different people, you're seeing your face on the same person. He paused. Prosopagnosia wouldn't explain it. Neither would any of the standard dissociative presentations I can think of. So, I said. So the standard explanations don't fit well, he said. Which doesn't mean there isn't a medical explanation. It means the obvious ones aren't it. He looked at me. But I want to tell you what I find most significant about your account. What? The coffee shop, he said. The 40 minutes. The specific details, the way it held the book, the way it looked up. These are not the details of a fleeting misperception. You spent 40 minutes in close proximity to this person and your observations were consistent throughout. That is not what a stress-induced misperception looks like. Misperceptions don't sustain. No, I said. Which means, he said carefully, that whatever you saw in that coffee shop was real in the sense of being a persistent, observable phenomenon. He paused. Whether that phenomenon is you, another person who resembles you with unusual precision, or something else, I can't tell you. But it was there. It looked at me, I said. Directly. And it showed no recognition. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. That's the part, he said, that I keep coming back to. Chapter 6, What I found after the coffee shop. I began to look. Not for the double, not specifically, not as a hunt. But for information. For the frame that would contain what was happening to me. Because I am a person who finds the absence of a frame more disturbing than the presence of a frightening one. Better a terrible explanation than no explanation. I found that the experience of encountering a second version of oneself has a name, doppelganger, from the German, the double walker, and a long history. It appears in the folklore of nearly every culture that has left written records. It appears in the accounts of figures as varied as Queen Elizabeth I, who reportedly saw her own double lying in her chamber shortly before her death, and Percy Bysshe Shelley, who is said to have met his double on the terrace at Corso Magni. It appears in the clinical literature under various headings. Otoscopy, the experience of seeing one's own body from outside heutoscopy, a more complex variant involving a double that is perceived as both self and other. Most clinical accounts describe experiences that are brief, hallucinatory, associated with specific neurological events, epilepsy, migraine, near-death states. Not sustained. Not 40 minutes in a coffee shop. The folklore accounts are different. They are sustained. They describe doubles that persist, that are encountered repeatedly, that behave with increasing autonomy, that seem to be doing something, approaching, converging, working towards something. The accounts describe variously as replacement, as merger, as the completion of something begun when the double first appeared. In the Germanic tradition, to see your double is to see your death. I did not find this comforting. But I found something else in the folklore. Something I did not immediately classify as comforting or the opposite. In many accounts, the double does not simply appear. It progresses. First seen at a distance. Then seen closer. Then seen engaging with the world, using objects, occupying spaces, behaving with increasing specificity. And eventually, indistinguishable. The double does not come to destroy its original. It comes to become it. Chapter 7. The journal. I am going to read from my journal here. Not the whole of it. I have been keeping detailed records since the coffee shop incident, and the journal runs to more than 60 pages. But the significant entries. The moments where the progression became visible. Entry, April 14th. Saw it again today. Brief, on the street outside my building, early morning. It was walking in the direction of the tube, the same direction I walk. Same pace I walk. I was looking down at my phone, and when I looked up it was there, 30 meters ahead of me, from the back. Same jacket. Same gait. I stopped. It did not stop or look back. It turned the corner at the end of the road, my turn, the turn I make every morning, and when I reached the corner it was gone. Duration. Approximately 15 seconds. State. Normal. Slightly tired. Not stressed. I have started noting the weather because I thought for a while there might be a connection between sightings and light conditions. But the coffee shop was in good artificial light, so this theory doesn't hold. Entry, April 29th. Twice this week. Once on the street, once through the window of the cafe across from my office. The window sighting lasted maybe 20 seconds. I was making coffee in the office kitchen, which looks across an internal courtyard at a row of small ground floor businesses, one of which is a cafe. I glanced out and it was at a table by the window. Reading again. The same hold. I'm noticing that it is always reading or working. Always engaged in something recognizably mine. The reading habit is very specific, the broken spine, the thumb on the lower page corner. The walking pace and direction. These are not generic details. It is doing the things I do. Entry, May 12th. Something new today. I was working from home, morning, at my desk. My desk faces the window that looks onto the street below. I was in the middle of something, some copy for a client, nothing remarkable, and I had that feeling. I don't have a better name for it. The feeling that something is about to happen. Not anxiety. A quality of the moment changing slightly, a gathering of attention in the air. I looked out the window. It was across the street. Standing on the pavement, facing my window. Not moving. Looking up. At me. I did not move. We were perhaps 12 meters apart, a two-story drop between us, and we looked at each other for, I counted afterward, 47 seconds. It walked away without hurrying. In the direction of the shops. In the direction I go when I need things. It walked exactly as I walk. I sat at my desk for an hour and did not open a document. Chapter 8. Marcus again. I went back to Marcus in May, the week after the window incident. I showed him the journal. He read it carefully, the whole of it, which took some time. I made tea in his kitchen while he read, and when I came back he was on the last page with the expression of a person who is thinking carefully about what they are going to say. He put the journal down. The progression, he said. Yes, I said. From incidental sightings, the shopping center, the train, to what happened at your window. It is looking at you now. Before, it seemed unaware of you. Now it's aware. Or it was always aware, I said, and is only now showing it. He considered this. That's more frightening, he said. I know. He picked up the journal again and looked at the May 12th entry. 47 seconds, he said. You stood at your window and it stood on the pavement and you looked at each other for 47 seconds. He put it down. What did you feel? I had thought about this. I had been trying to find the accurate word for what I felt in those 47 seconds since it happened, and I had arrived at something. Recognized, I said. I felt recognized. Not in the way of two people recognizing each other, not warmth, not social recognition. In the way of being identified. As if it were looking at me and thinking, yes. That one. That is the one. Marcus was quiet. Like being designated, I said. He nodded slowly. Have you told anyone else? He asked. No. I think, he said carefully, that you should. Chapter 9. The others. I told you I found something in the folklore of the double. What I didn't tell you is that what I actually found, in the months of research that followed the coffee shop, was not primarily folklore. It was people. I found them through a combination of methods. A forum dedicated to unexplained personal experiences, a subreddit with a smaller and more serious community than the name would suggest, and a single academic paper, a 2019 study in a psychology journal, that described a small cohort reporting persistent encounters with a figure described as physically identical to themselves, over a period of months, with an apparent pattern of increasing proximity. The forum and subreddit were a mixture of genuine and performative accounts, and I spent time learning to distinguish between them. The performative accounts had a quality of construction, too shaped, too narrative, with the specific satisfaction of a story being told rather than an experience being described. The genuine accounts had a different quality. They were uncertain. They contained details that didn't serve the narrative. They contradicted themselves in minor ways. They had the texture of real experience. I found 11 accounts I considered credible. Of those 11, several shared features that aligned with my own experience in ways I found significant. First, the progression. Every account described the movement from distance to proximity over time. The double was first seen far away, then closer, then very close. Something was changing. Second, the lack of recognition. In every account, the double did not appear to recognize the original. Or appeared not to. Several described the later shift. A point at which the double began to look at them. At which apparent unawareness became apparent awareness. Third, the doing of familiar things. Multiple accounts described the double engaging in activities specific to the original. One woman described her double reading the same obscure novel series she was in the middle of. A man described his double running his exact usual route. The specificity was the recurring detail. And fourth, the detail I found most significant, that I had not yet experienced, and that I hoped with cold dread I would not. Contact. In 3 of the 11 accounts, the double had made direct contact with the original. Not violent. Not confrontational. Something more disquieting. In all 3 cases, the double had spoken to the original. Had said things that were accurate, had used their name, had mentioned specific details of their life that a stranger could not have known. In all 3 cases, the person had been unable to determine, in the moment, whether they were speaking to the double or looking in a mirror. Chapter 10. The woman from the forum. One of the 11 credible accounts was from a woman I would call Nina, who had posted approximately 2 years before I found it and who was, when I contacted her, still active on the platform. She agreed to speak to me. We talked by video call. She was in her late 30s, a teacher, and had the quality of someone who had processed something difficult and arrived at a stable relationship with it, not peace, not resolution, but stability. It started the way yours did, she said. Sightings. Always brief at first. I was in a city I didn't know well, I had moved there for work, and I thought at first that I simply had a lookalike somewhere in the city and kept running into her. She paused. But the details were too specific. I'm a twin, not identical, fraternal, and I know the difference between someone who resembles you and someone who is you. This was the second thing. When did it change? I asked. When did you understand what it was? When it started going to my places, she said. My gym, my regular supermarket, the park near my flat where I run. Not near my flat, not my neighborhood, my specific routes. The exact loop I run. 3 kilometers, same direction every time, same turnaround point. She paused. I started running different routes. It found the new routes. I felt something cold at the base of my spine. How long was the progression? I asked. From first sighting to contact. 8 months, she said. What happened at 8 months? She was quiet for a moment. I was in my kitchen, she said. Early morning. Making coffee. My back to the door. And I heard footsteps in the hall, which is impossible, because I live alone and the front door was locked. I turned around and it was standing in the kitchen doorway. I waited. It looked at me, she said. And it said my name. My actual name, not a common name, the specific name my parents gave me. She paused. And then it said, I know this is frightening. But I'm not going to hurt you. I was very still. What did you do? I asked. I screamed, she said, flatly. And it left. Just went. I looked in the hall and it was empty and the front door was still locked. She paused. That was the last time I saw it. After the kitchen, it stopped. It stopped entirely. Entirely, she said. As if the contact was the thing it needed. As if reaching me directly was the point, and when it did, it was done. She looked at me through the screen. How far along are you? She asked. I told her. It had stood at my window. It had looked at me for 47 seconds. She nodded slowly. Then you have some time yet, she said. But not a lot. Chapter 11. Changing my habits. I considered, after speaking with Nina, simply moving. The bluntest possible response. Removing myself from the environment in which the sightings had occurred. New city, new flat, new routines. I didn't, for 2 reasons. The first was practical. I had a lease, a job, a life. The second was more honest. I didn't think it would work. Of the 11 accounts I had found, 2 people had moved during the progression. Both described the double reappearing in the new location within weeks. Not months, weeks. Whatever the double was tracking, it was not tracking geography. So I stayed. And I began to change my habits. Not dramatically, I was wary of the feedback loop that would represent. If the double was mirroring my habits, then my habits were the thread between us, and I did not want to change so completely that I lost the thread entirely. I wanted to know where it was. But I introduced variations. I changed my running route slightly each week. I changed my coffee shop. I changed the order of my morning routine. Small deliberate differences, introduced one at a time, and I watched to see if the double updated. It did. Within days of each change, the double was reflecting the new version. New running route. The double was on the new route. New coffee shop. The double was in the new coffee shop. New morning routine, observable only if you were watching from outside the building at the right time, and yet on the 2 occasions I observed the double in the morning, it had the specific timing and direction of the new routine. This established something I had been uncertain about. The double was not operating from a fixed model, a snapshot of me from a specific moment. It was updating in real time. It was tracking me as I was, not as I had been. Which meant one of 2 things. Either it was watching me closely enough to update from observation. Or it had some other access. I did not know which was worse. Chapter 12. The photograph. In June, 7 months after the first sighting, I was photographed with the double. I should say immediately. This was not intentional. I did not know it was happening. I found out 3 weeks later. A colleague, I call her Sarah, had been at the same street festival I attended in June, in a different part of the crowd, taking casual photographs throughout the afternoon. She mentioned it later in the context of something else, said she'd been sorting through photos and had seen me in one of them. She showed me on her phone. I was in the photograph. Clearly visible, center left, the green jacket, my face in three-quarter profile looking towards something out of frame. And standing 4 people to my right, slightly behind, partially obscured by a tall man in a grey coat, was the double. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Sarah asked if something was wrong. I asked her to send me the photograph. I looked at it for hours that evening. The figure 4 people to my right, partially obscured, visible from approximately the collarbone up. The same jacket. The face in profile, angled toward the same point I had been looking toward. Both of us looking at the same thing, 4 people apart, in the middle of a crowd. And the thing that struck me most was not its presence. I had been seeing the double for 7 months. Its presence in a crowd I was in was not surprising. It was the quality of its presence in the image. In photographs, most people look slightly different from how they look in person. The specific flatness of a camera image, the moment of stillness captured against the motion of life. Most people look like versions of themselves in photographs. The double looked exactly like me in the photograph. Not like a version of me. Not like me at a particular moment. Exactly like me, with the precision of a reproduction rather than the approximation of a family resemblance. As if the photograph had captured 2 instances of the same image. I showed the photograph to Marcus. He sat with it for a long time. I want to send this to someone, he said. Who? A colleague. She works in forensic image analysis. I want a professional assessment of whether this has been altered. It had not been altered. The assessment, which came back 2 weeks later, confirmed that the image showed no signs of digital manipulation. 2 separate individuals, both present in the original file's metadata, captured in a single frame. 2 separate individuals. I did not find the word separate comforting. Chapter 13. Other people who have seen it. After the photograph, I made a decision. I told people. Not everyone. Not widely. But the people closest to me. Marcus I had already told. I now told 3 others. My friend Priya, who has known me since university and who is the most likely of the people I know to respond to the inexplicable with curiosity rather than alarm. She asked to see the photograph. She looked at it for a long time. That is you, she said. I know. I mean, I can't find a difference. And I'm looking. She paused. That is very strange. I told my sister. She is older by 4 years and has the quality of an older sibling who has absorbed more alarm on your behalf than you know. She went very still when I described the window incident. When I showed her the photograph, she said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "I don't know yet." She said, "I want to see it. Not to confront it. I want to see it so I know what we're dealing with." She saw it 2 weeks later. She called me on a Wednesday afternoon and said, "I'm outside your building and I think I'm looking at it." I said, "Don't approach it." She said, "I'm not. I'm watching it. It's standing at the corner of your road. Just standing. Looking toward your building." I was at work. 12 miles away. I said, "Stay on the phone." She said, "It's moving. It's walking toward the door. It's going to," I said, "What?" She said, "It's pressing the intercom. You're flat. It pressed your buzzer." I did not speak. She said, "No one answered. Obviously you're not there." It pressed again. Now it's walking away. Around the corner. I arrived home 90 minutes later. My sister was waiting in her car. We sat in the car together in silence for a while. Then she said, "That was not a person who resembles you. I've met people who resemble you. That was something else." I asked her what she meant by something else. She was quiet for a moment. "Like it was you but without the part that makes you you," she said. Chapter 14. The distance closes. In July, I began to track the distance. I mean this literally. I kept a record of how close each sighting was, estimated in meters. The shopping center. Perhaps 15. The train. 4 rows, maybe 6 meters. The coffee shop. 2 tables, 4 meters. The window. 12 meters of street and a 2-story drop. Then, after the window, a gap in close-range sightings. Weeks of the double glimpsed at a distance, across the street, at the end of a road, in a crowd. As if it had established something with the window incident and had withdrawn to a different register. Then July. And the distance began to close again. Entry, July 3rd. Saw it at the station. Rush hour, busy platform. I was standing near the edge waiting for the train and I became aware of it, the feeling I have learned to recognize, the gathering quality, the air changing, and I looked to my left and it was standing 3 people away. Facing the track. Profile toward me. I studied the profile for approximately 4 minutes until the train arrived. The profile is my profile. Exactly. I have looked at photographs of myself in profile, the specific angle, left side, and this was that profile. No divergence I could identify. Entry, July 11th. It was in the supermarket. I came around the end of an aisle and nearly walked into it. Perhaps 1 meter of distance, 1 second of shared space before I stepped back. 1 meter. It did not react. It was examining something on the shelf, a tin, held up and read at a specific close distance, the way I read tins, and it did not turn when I stepped back. Either it didn't notice me, or it chose not to show that it noticed. I left the supermarket without getting what I came for. Entry, July 19th. Something new. I was sitting on the wall outside my building, warm evening, I had come out for some air, and it came around the corner. Walking toward me. Down the pavement in my direction. This is the first time the approach has been direct and head-on. Every previous sighting has been at an angle, to my side, across a space, in profile or from behind. This was coming directly toward me. I did not move. I sat on the wall. It came to approximately 3 meters. Then it stopped. We were 3 meters apart on an evening pavement. Looking at each other. My face looking at my face. It looked at me for what I counted as 22 seconds. Then it turned and walked away in the direction it had come. Chapter 15. What I know. 8 months after the first sighting, I want to document what I know and what I don't. What I know. There is a second version of me. It is not a hallucination, it has been photographed, observed by multiple independent witnesses, it has pressed my buzzer, it has left observable traces in the world. It is real in whatever sense real applies to something that should not exist. It has been approaching over 8 months, not steadily but progressively. The distance has closed from 15 meters to 3. The duration of sightings has increased. The quality of contact has changed from incidental to deliberate. It mirrors me with increasing precision. My habits, my routes, my specific ways of doing things. It updates when I change. It is tracking me in real time. It is aware of me. Whatever the initial ambiguity, whether it saw me in those early sightings, whether the lack of recognition was genuine, it is now clearly aware of my existence. It looked at me from 3 meters for 22 seconds. What I don't know. What it is. I have theories, or the theories of the people who have described similar experiences, the frameworks from folklore and clinical literature and the forum accounts. None fit cleanly. What it wants. Or whether want is the right word. Whether it has intention in the human sense or whether what I am reading as intention is simply the directionality of a process, like a river flowing downhill. Not wanting to reach the sea but going there anyway. What contact will mean. How much time I have. Chapter 16. The notebook. Let me describe the notebook. It is a standard A5 hardback notebook, dark blue, the same brand I have used since I started keeping a journal 15 years ago. I buy them in bulk from a stationery shop near my flat. I have approximately 30 of them stacked in a cardboard box in my wardrobe. On the 28th of July, I pulled a new notebook from the box. It had been used. Not fully, the first 11 pages, written in a hand that I recognized as mine, in ink I recognized as the specific blue-black of the pen I use. A journal entry, dated from 4 weeks in the future. I am going to read this entry in full. But first, the handwriting analysis. I asked Marcus's forensic contact to assess it against samples of my own. The assessment was that the two samples were indistinguishable. Not consistent, indistinguishable. Second, I had not written those pages. The dates were in the future. The content contained events I had not yet experienced. Events that subsequently occurred. The entry read, August 28. I have been trying to understand what is happening to me. Not to it, to me. What the approach of the double is changing in me. Because it is changing something. I sleep differently. I have slept lightly since the first sighting, the specific light sleep of a person who is alert to something, and now I barely sleep at all. 2-3 hours. I wake at arbitrary times and lie in the specific quality of 3 am darkness and feel the shape of whatever is coming. I feel it now in the day too. Not as a sighting, it is not always visible. But as a quality of proximity. A density in the air around me, close but not localized, coming from no specific direction. The feeling of a thing that is very near. I have been thinking about what Nina said. That after the contact in her kitchen, the situation ended. I have been thinking about the word ended. What does it mean for a situation like this to end? I have 3 possibilities. The first is that the double achieves its purpose, whatever its purpose is, and withdraws, as Nina's did. The second is that I find a way to stop the approach. To interrupt the progression, to create a sufficient break in the pattern. I have been working on this. I have not yet found the break. The third possibility is the one I have been trying not to look at directly. The possibility that the approach completes, and the completion is not a withdrawal but a continuation. That the double does not leave. That the ending of the situation is not the departure of one of us but the consolidation into one. I don't know which one of us that would leave. I found this entry. I read it. I put the notebook in my desk drawer and went for a walk. I was gone for 2 hours. When I came back, I opened the drawer. The notebook was gone. Chapter 17. September. The notebook entry was dated August 28. When I found it, it was July 30th. It described events that had not yet occurred. I want to account for August, because the entry had been about August. The entry had been accurate. Sleep. I went from fitful to barely at all. 3 hours a night, sometimes less. I lay awake in the dark and felt the thing I can only describe as proximity. Not a sound, not a sensation, not anything I could identify with a specific sense. A quality of the air around me that had changed, had taken on a density, a character, that felt directed. As if the darkness in my flat was not uniform but was thicker in certain places. Thicker near the window. Thicker near the door. The sightings in August were different from all previous sightings. Less visible, fewer clear encounters in public, and more present. The feeling of proximity without the confirmation of sight. I would look up from work and know, with certainty I could not justify, that the double was very near. I would walk to the window and the street below would be empty. I would go to the door of my flat and open it and the corridor would be empty. But the feeling was there. Constant. Growing. Entry, August 15th. I am writing this during the day because I cannot write at night anymore. At night the feeling is too strong, it crowds out coherent thought. The third possibility in the notebook entry, I have been thinking about it. What would it mean for the approach to complete? What would it mean to consolidate? I have been trying to find accounts of people who reached this stage and came through it. I found one. A man, I'll call him Thomas, who posted on the forum 2 years ago and whose account I had initially discarded as too constructed. I revisited it. I had been wrong. It was genuine, and the reason it had seemed constructed was that it described something I had not yet experienced and therefore could not recognize as real. The final stage. Thomas described the approach closing entirely. The double not at a distance, not pressing his buzzer, but present. In the same room. Close enough to touch. He described a conversation. Not a frightening conversation. A conversation in which the double told him something Thomas did not reproduce in the post but described as the thing I needed to understand about myself that I had been unable to understand alone. And then it was done. Thomas wrote. I no longer experience it as separate from me. Whether that is because it is gone, or because I have changed, or because something was completed, I cannot say. I am still here. I am still me. But I am more me than I was before. I have read this entry many times. I am still trying to understand it. Chapter 18. The last clear sighting. September 3rd. The last entry in the journal before things became difficult to document. Entry, September 3rd. Today the distance was approximately 1 meter. I was in my kitchen. Morning. I turned from the counter and it was in the kitchen doorway. My kitchen doorway, my kitchen, the flat whose locks I have checked repeatedly. 1 meter. We looked at each other for what I estimate was 30 seconds. I want to describe its face as I saw it from 1 meter, because this is the closest I have been and because the detail matters. It looks like me. This I have established and this remains true. But from 1 meter, something is different from the distant sightings. Something the distance had obscured. It is tired. Not tired in the way of a person who has not slept, or not only that. Tired in a deeper sense. A weariness in the face that comes from long-sustained effort. The specific quality of something that has been doing something very difficult for a very long time. And something else. It looks like me, but it looks like a version of me that has been through something I haven't been through. Not older, we are the same apparent age. But more one. More present to difficulty. The face of someone who has approached their own double from the other side and knows what that cost. I looked at this face for 30 seconds. And then, for the first time, the double spoke. It said, I know. 2 words. I know. I could not speak. I was not capable of speech. I stood in my kitchen and my body had gone entirely still, the paralysis of something fundamental being confronted. It said, it's almost done. And it was gone. Chapter 19. What I think it meant. It's almost done. I have spent weeks trying to understand this. Not in the sense of interpreting a threat, I have not experienced the double as threatening. When I say I have felt the approach, I do not mean danger. I mean convergence. What I think it meant is this. I think the double is not a separate entity in the way I initially understood. I think it is a part of me, not a fragment, not a shadow, not the psychological concept of the shadow self, though that framework contains some truth. Something more literal. I think I have been, for 8 months, approaching myself. The version of me that is coming toward me, that has closed the distance from 15 meters to 1, that pressed my buzzer and wrote in my notebook and stood in my kitchen and said it's almost done, I think that version is not separate from me. I think it is the part of me that knows things I have been unable to know directly. That has access to the information I have been keeping at a distance. The things about my life, my habits, myself that I do not look at directly because looking at them directly is uncomfortable. I think the approach is a confrontation. Not a violent confrontation. Not an unwanted one. A confrontation that is also a recognition. Of the kind that Thomas described. The thing I needed to understand about myself that I had been unable to understand alone. I don't know if this interpretation is right. I am possibly projecting. Possibly constructing a framework that makes an inexplicable thing feel manageable by making it therapeutic rather than threatening. But I believe it. And in the absence of a better framework, this one is what I have. It's almost done. The distance is almost closed. Whatever is going to happen when it completes is very near. I am still here. For now. Chapter 20. The people who came before. In the final weeks before this account ends, I want to record some of the other accounts I found. Not because they explain what is happening, they don't, not completely, but because they provide context. A sense of the scale of the phenomenon. Of its long history and many forms. From the forum, a woman I'll call her, posted 3 years ago. I want to tell you what nobody told me, which is that it doesn't end badly. I know that's not the story you're prepared for. I know the folklore says to see your double is to see your death. I've read all of it. But here's what my double actually was. It was the version of me that had already made the decision I was terrified of making. It had already left the marriage, already gone back to school, already built the life I was unable to choose while I was still choosing it. And when the approach completed, when it finally reached me, what happened was not that I was replaced. What happened was that I understood what I was going to do. And I did it. And I am still here, more present in my life than I have ever been. This account stayed with me. From the academic paper, Subject C, a 38-year-old man. The figure I encountered over approximately 10 months appeared to be me at a different stage of my life, specifically, a stage I had not yet reached. It was not older. It was more settled. There was a quality of having arrived about it that I recognized because it was the quality I was trying to reach and failing. The progression of sightings corresponded, I came to understand in retrospect, to a progression in my own internal state. As I moved closer to the decisions the double seemed to have already made, the double moved closer to me. When I finally made those decisions, when I committed to them fully, the sighting ceased. And from Nina, in a second conversation in August, when I told her about the notebook and the kitchen. I said earlier that after the contact, it stopped. That's true. What I didn't say, what I wasn't sure I wanted to say, is what happened after. I was different. Not transformed in some dramatic sense. But there were things I had known before as theory, things I understood intellectually, about my life, about what I wanted, about the specific way I had been living that was not fully right, and after the contact, I knew these same things as fact. As lived. As if I had been through them rather than thought about them. As if the double, who had been through them, had given me that experience directly when it came close enough. I can't explain this better than I can explain the original experience. But it is what happened. I am still me. I am more me. Those are not contradictory. Chapter 21. The last entry. This is the last entry in the journal. Written on the morning of the day before the account ends. Entry, September 22nd. I'm going to try to write this carefully. The proximity I described in August, the feeling of the double very near, without the confirmation of sight, has been increasing. Each day of this month, slightly more than the day before. Not a dramatic change. Incremental. Steady. Last night I woke at 3 am and the feeling was stronger than it has ever been. Not in the flat. In the room. Not in the room. In the specific corner of the room where my desk is. I did not turn on the light. I lay very still, in the way I have learned to be still in these moments, the specific quality of stillness that is not avoidance but attention. The stillness that says, I know you're there. I'm not pretending otherwise. And in that stillness, something clarified. I have been treating the double as other. This is the word I keep using, that everyone uses. The other version, the other me, the other. And this framework, this separation, is perhaps the thing that has been making the approach so slow, so elongated, so frightening. The distance is not only physical. It is the distance of my resistance to what the double represents. Every time I have looked away, moved away, changed my route, avoided the thing that was coming toward me, I was maintaining the distance. Actively maintaining it. What happened last night, lying still in the dark with the double in the corner of my room, is that I stopped maintaining it. I did not do anything. I did not speak, did not reach out. I simply stopped making the distance. Stop treating the corner of the room as something to be noted and categorized and at arm's length, and let it be simply present, in the way that my own thoughts are present, in the way that the difficult things I know about myself are present in me when I stop trying to put them somewhere else. Something shifted. Not dramatically. Not visibly. Something very quiet and very fundamental. I fell back asleep. In the morning, I checked the corner of the room. Nothing. The room was the room. Ordinary morning light, ordinary furniture. The notebook was back in the drawer. I don't know what this means. I'm going to stop writing and go to the window and look out at the street. Chapter 22. What I saw. I went to the window. The street was a street. A Tuesday morning in late September. Clear light, the specific quality of autumn, leaves beginning to turn on the plane trees. A person walking a dog. A car parked half on the curb. The ordinary evidence of a world in which ordinary things are happening. No double. I stood at the window for a long time. And then I understood something, or I understood it better than before. The double has been getting closer. And I have been getting closer to it. Not in the sense of chasing it, not in the sense of deliberate approach. In the sense that the 8 months of this experience have changed me. The lightness of sleep, the constant alertness, the specific kind of attention that comes from knowing something is coming toward you and not looking away, these things have produced a version of me that is different from the version who was in the shopping center in November, who thought for a moment he had seen himself and dismissed it as a reflection. That version was a person at a comfortable distance from himself. The version I am now is closer. I don't think the double is a separate thing. I think I have been explaining it as separate because separate was the only framework available. My double, the other me, the second version. Always the other, always the outside thing, always the thing coming toward me from somewhere else. But what if the direction is wrong? What if it is not coming toward me from outside but rising from inside, becoming visible as I become capable of seeing it, getting closer as I get closer to it? What if the distance closing over 8 months is not the physical distance between two bodies but the psychological distance between a person and the part of themselves they have been unable to face? I am not explaining away what I have experienced. The photograph is real. The notebook is real. The buzzer was pressed. My sister saw it. Marcus saw the photograph. These things happened. But the external world evidence and the internal interpretation are not incompatible. The double is real. And the double is me. Both things. I stood at the window for a long time. Nothing on the street below. But in the window's reflection, the specific quality of a window as a mirror, slightly imperfect, the glass doing what glass does, I saw my own face. And for the first time in 8 months, I saw only one face. Chapter 23. 3 weeks later. I am writing this 3 weeks after the last entry. The double has not appeared since September 22nd. I want to be precise. I have not seen it. I have not felt the proximity. I have checked my notebooks and all as I left them. My buzzer has not been pressed by anyone I don't know. My sister has been past the flat twice and reported nothing. This could mean any number of things. It could mean the process has completed in the way Thomas described, not a departure but a consolidation, a becoming less separate. It could mean the approach was interrupted by whatever happened on the night of September 21st, when I stopped maintaining the distance. I don't know which it is. What I can tell you is what is different. I sleep. Not perfectly. But in the way I slept before November, the ordinary sleep of a person who is not alert to something. I am making decisions I had been unable to make. Some are practical, specific things in my life that had been stored, conversations that needed to happen, directions that needed to be chosen. I have been making them with an ease I don't entirely account for but that I notice and am grateful for. I feel, and this is the detail that I return to when I try to summarize the whole experience, more like myself. Not more than before. Not some elevated version. Closer to the actual version. As if the gap between the external self and whoever is doing the watching from the inside has become smaller. More present. That is the best word for it. More present in my own life. Chapter 24. Marcus, afterward. I went to see Marcus in the first week of October. I brought the journal. He read it in the same careful way, the whole thing, including the new entries. He put it down. "You're well," he said. "I think so," I said. "You look well. Better than you've looked since April." He paused. "Better, possibly, than you looked in November. Before it started." "The ending you described," he said. "Not seeing it. Making decisions. Feeling more present." He paused. "I want to offer you the clinical reading, which is the resolution of a sustained psychogenic event sometimes produces exactly this kind of integrative experience. The ending feels like a consolidation because something fragmented has become whole. The external manifestation, the sightings, the photograph, the notebook, may have been the form the psychogenic process took." "You don't believe that," I said. He looked at me. "I don't know what I believe," he said honestly. "The photograph is real. The forensic analysis is real. I saw that photograph. That was you and that was something that should not be." He paused. "But the ending maps almost exactly onto what a therapist would describe as a successful integration process. Which is either evidence that psychology can explain the whole thing, or evidence that the whole thing was, in some deep sense, psychological all along. Or, I said, that psychology and whatever this is are describing the same thing from different sides." He was quiet for a long time. "Yes," he said. "That." Chapter 25. Nina, afterward. I called Nina in October to tell her my situation appeared to have resolved. "How long?" she asked. "From first sighting to end." 10 months, I said. "Similar to mine," she said. "Mine was 8. Do you have a theory about the timeline?" I asked. "Why it takes the time it takes?" She thought for a moment. "I think it takes exactly as long as it needs to take," she said. "The progression stops when the person is ready. When you have arrived at whatever the double needs you to arrive at." She paused. "In my case, it took 8 months because that was how long I needed to get to the point where I could be in my kitchen at 6 in the morning and hear my name spoken by my own voice and not fall completely apart. That took 8 months of preparation." "Preparation," I said. "That's what the approach is," she said. "Each sighting is a preparation. Getting you used to the idea. Getting you closer to what it is. So that when the contact comes, you can receive it." I thought about this. About the November shopping center, the ambiguous maybe. The train, the confirmation. The coffee shop, 40 minutes. The window, 47 seconds. The pavement, 3 meters, 22 seconds. The kitchen, 1 meter, 30 seconds. A progression of exposure. Each step closer, each step longer, each step more certain. "It was kind," I said. Nina was quiet. "Yes," she said. "I've thought about that a lot. Whatever it is, whatever the mechanism, it was kind. It came as close as I could manage each time, and no closer. It waited until I was ready." Chapter 26. What I think now? I want to set down, carefully, what I think now. I think there are second versions of us. Not in the sense that folklore describes them, not death omens, not harbingers, not the Jungian shadow self, though that framework contains some truth. Something more literal and less explicable. I think the second version is the version of us that is ahead. That has already done what we are still working toward. That has already made the decisions, integrated the difficulties, arrived at the place we are moving toward. I think it approaches when the distance between the current self and that future self becomes small enough to be felt. When the person is close enough to who they need to be that the gap between who they are and who they are becoming becomes visible. Literally, externally visible. As an approaching figure. I think the approach closes when the gap closes. When the person arrives at a greater alignment. A lesser distance between the external and the interior. Between the performing self and the actual self. And when the approach completes, the second version is no longer separate. Not because you have been replaced. Because you have been joined. I don't know if this is correct. I don't know if it is metaphor or mechanism or both. I don't know if the photograph is fully explainable by this account. But I know that the approach is over and I am here and I am more here than I was and the distance has closed and I am not afraid of what closed it. That is what I know. Chapter 27. A note to whoever reads this. If you are reading this because you have seen yourself across a shopping center, on a train, in a coffee shop, at your window, I want to say the things I needed someone to say to me. You are not losing your mind. What you are experiencing is real and it has been experienced by others before you and they are, as far as I can determine, intact. The approach is not a threat. It may feel like a threat because approach is threatening by default. But the double is not coming for you in the sense of danger. It is coming for you in the sense of convergence. Don't look away. I know every instinct says to look away, to find the explanation that makes it ordinary, to call it tiredness or stress or bad light. And those explanations will almost work, for a while. But they cost you the time and attention you should be spending on the approach. Look at it. When it comes to the window, look at it. When it sits in the coffee shop, sit nearby and look at it for 40 minutes. Let it come as near as it comes on its own schedule, without forcing the distance or refusing it. And when it speaks to you, it will speak to you, eventually, when you are ready, listen. Because what it has to say is something you already know and have been unable to say to yourself. I know. It's almost done. I'm still here. Afterward. I finished the main account 3 months ago. Since then, 2 things have happened that I want to add as a coda. The first. I found another account. Not on the forum but in a letter, a genuine paper letter, sent to me by a woman who had found a partial version of this account online. She is 71 years old. She encountered her double in her early 30s, and she has spent the past 4 decades thinking about it. Her letter was the most considered description of the phenomenon I have encountered. She wrote, among other things, the following. I have long believed that the double is not a separate entity and never was. I believe it is the most honest version of the person, the version that has finished the work of self-deception, the work of performance and management and the careful construction of a self that can be presented to the world. The double does not perform. It simply is. And when it approaches, what it is approaching is not the body of its original but the possibility of the original achieving the same condition. Of being, simply and without performance, itself. The approach ends when the original arrives at this. When there is no longer a meaningful difference between the two, not because the original has been replaced but because the original has become what the double already was. Honest. Present. Unperforming. Here. I have read this passage many times. The second thing. I saw myself in a mirror last week and felt something I have not felt since before this began. Not startlement. Not the half-second of wrongness I have felt in mirror since November. Ordinary recognition. My face. Me. No ambiguity. Just me in a mirror. I stood there for a long time, looking. And what I felt, and I want to record this accurately, because it is the detail that makes the whole account worth documenting. What I felt was relief. Not the relief of a danger past. The relief of a meeting arrived at. Of a long separation ended. Of someone I had been trying to reach for a very long time, suddenly, simply, here. End. There's a second version of me, and it's getting closer. A whisper void documentary narrative. All characters and events are fictional. All feelings are real. Extended accounts and documents. Extended journal. Complete month-by-month record. The following is the complete record from my journal, which I kept throughout the 10 months of the approach. The earlier account drew on the most significant entries. What follows fills in what was between them. The texture of ordinary days against which the approach unfolded. November. Month 1. I want to describe the quality of the month before I saw the double. I had been in my current life for approximately 3 years at that point. 3 years in the flat on the same street, the same job, the same small but stable circle of friends and routines. It was a life that was working, in the way that a machine works. The parts functioned, the outputs were acceptable, the mechanisms of daily existence proceeded without significant failure. What I had been less willing to examine was whether the life was mine. I don't mean this in the dramatic sense of existential crisis. I mean something more specific and more embarrassing. I had been living, for those 3 years, in a way that was organized primarily around what required the least exposure. The job. Chosen because it was available and because I was good at it and because it did not require me to put myself forward in ways that felt vulnerable. The flat. Comfortable enough, but never quite made into a home in the way that a person makes a home when they expect to be somewhere for a long time. The relationships. Maintained with genuine care, but at a specific regulated distance, the distance that allows warmth without the particular kind of risk that warmth at closer range would involve. I was managing. It was not bad. But it was not all there. On the Tuesday of the shopping center, I have looked back at my journal from that period, trying to find any indication of unusual state, any marker that this day was different from the ones before it. I find nothing. I was tired from a project that had run long. I needed shampoo. I was thinking about what to have for dinner. And then the glass doors. And my face on the other side. I went home and made dinner and thought about it all evening and told no one. I want to record, now that I am on the other side of it, what I think the November sighting was doing. Not what it meant in any metaphysical sense, I will come to that. What function it served in the sequence. I think the shopping center sighting was a calibration. Not for me, for the double. Or not a calibration, exactly, but a registration. The moment at which the gap between where I was and where I needed to be became small enough to be visible. The moment the approach began. Because the approach had to start somewhere. Something had to happen that could register as a starting point. And the shopping center, the glass door, the ambiguous reflection, the 2 seconds that were too long to be a reflection but short enough to doubt, was exactly calibrated to produce a specific response in a person of my temperament. Not alarm. Not conviction. Just a weight. A thing to carry. The beginning of the paying attention. December. The silence. I said I did not see the double again for 4 months after the train. That is true in the sense of direct sightings. But December was not without the double's presence. It was more subtle than the sightings. It was in the quality of certain moments. A feeling that the air of a room had recently held something it was no longer holding. The specific sense that a space had been occupied moments before I entered it. The empty coffee cup in the staff kitchen that I was certain had not been there when I arrived in the morning but could not have been mine because I had not had coffee that day. The book on my bedside table that had moved, not dramatically, not to a different surface, but rotated, so that the spine faced in instead of out, in the way you put a book when you are done with a section and want to mark your place in the pile. These were not events I recorded at the time. I had made my peace with the explanation that I had been tired and had seen something that wasn't there, and I was not in the business of cataloging small ambiguities that served no purpose but to undermine that peace. I recorded them later. After the coffee shop, when I went back through my memory of the intervening months and found that December was not empty. It was quiet, yes. But it was the quiet of a thing that had begun and was taking its time. I have spoken to others who described this period, the silence between the first clear sighting and the next, the months in which nothing visible happens but something is present. Nina described it as the preparation period. Not for me, for the double. As if it needed time to establish itself in my environment before it could appear again. As if the first appearance was the arrival and the months of quiet were the settling in. I think of it differently now. I think the silence was a gift. The space to adjust. The time to carry the weight of what I had seen without being confronted with it again before I was ready to be confronted. The double, or whatever intelligence or intention or directionality operates in it, was patient. It did not press its advantage in those months. It waited. I have come to find this patience one of the most significant things about the experience. Whatever came for me did not hurry. Did not force. Did not press close before I had some capacity to receive it. The approach took exactly the time it took because the time was not arbitrary, it was calibrated. January. Through March, forgetting. There is a version of this period that I am embarrassed to describe, because it involves the specific dishonesty that I have come to understand as central to the whole experience. The active forgetting. I forgot the shopping center and the train. Not completely, I could retrieve the memories if I looked for them. But I stopped looking. The weight I had been carrying since November, the specific, persistent weight of an unresolved question, began to lighten, not because the question had been resolved but because I had gotten better at not carrying it. At not picking it up when I woke in the morning. At keeping it somewhere I would not easily encounter it. This is a thing I am good at. I have been good at it for a long time. The management of the things I would prefer not to examine directly. The specific skills of putting difficult things down and walking away and being competent and functional and present seeming in the meanwhile. I was good at forgetting. And the double let me. It did not appear in those months. It did not interrupt the managed distance I had re-established. It gave me the winter to forget, and I used the winter to forget, and by March I had almost succeeded. Looking back, I think this was part of the preparation too. Not an accident of timing but a deliberate withdrawal. Let him forget. Let him establish his peace with the ordinary explanation. Let him return to the comfort of a life that is working, in the way that machines work. And then, when the peace is fully established, when the managed distance feels safe again, show him. The coffee shop. The 40 minutes. No possibility of misidentification. No possibility of dismissal. The double knew. It knew exactly when I had gotten comfortable enough that the next sighting would land with maximum impact. It had waited until the forgetting was complete before forcing the remembering. That is either frightening or considerate. I have concluded, over the months since, that it is both. April through June. Learning to look. After the coffee shop, I changed. Not dramatically and not all at once. But the quality of my attention changed in a way that I noticed and that others began to notice. Priya said, in May, that I seemed more awake than usual. She didn't mean it literally, she meant a quality of presence, of being there in conversations that I had previously inhabited with one part of my attention while another part was somewhere else. I had, since November, been doing what I described. Managing. Carrying the weight carefully, at a specified distance, not looking at it directly. After the coffee shop, I stopped managing and started attending. The difference between managing and attending is the difference between carrying something in a locked box and carrying it in your hands. The box is safer. You can put it down without spilling. You can pretend it's not heavy. But you know it's there, and the knowing takes up the same space it would take up if you were looking at it directly, and the effort of keeping it locked is its own kind of weight. After the coffee shop, I stopped locking the box. And what happened when I stopped was not what I had feared. I had feared that looking directly at the double, at what it was, at what it meant, at the specific uncomfortable implications of a second version of me existing in the world and getting closer, would be destabilizing in some fundamental way. That the weight, attended to directly, would be too heavy. It wasn't. It was heavy. It was genuinely, significantly heavy. But it was bearable in a way the managed distance had never been, because bearing something directly has a quality that carrying it at arm's length does not. Direct bearing is honest about the weight. The arm's length approach is dishonest. It pretends the weight is less than it is by putting it somewhere you don't have to feel it fully, which means you never know what you're actually dealing with. I started knowing what I was dealing with. And as I started knowing, the double started becoming more visible. Not coincidentally. On the sightings in April and May. I want to describe the April and May sightings in more detail than the journal entries provided, because something was happening in those months that the entries captured in outline but not in texture. The sightings were brief. I noted durations of 15 seconds, 20 seconds. But the quality of those seconds was different from the quality of the earlier sightings. The shopping center had been 2 seconds of vertigo. The train had been 6 minutes of stunned paralysis. The coffee shop had been 40 minutes of close observation. The April and May sightings were, I want to choose this word carefully, informative. What I mean is, I was learning something from them that went beyond simple confirmation that the double existed and was approaching. I was learning what the double was doing. What it was engaged in when I encountered it. The walking in the direction of my tube stop. The reading in the cafe visible from my office kitchen. The specific activities and the specific quality of their execution. And the more I observed, the more I understood that what I was watching was not mimicry but something more precise. The double was not copying me the way a person might copy a mannerism or adopt a habit. It was being me in the way that I am me. Without effort, without the quality of performance that mimicry always contains. It held books the way I hold books because it was holding books. It walked my pace because that was its pace. There is a moment in one of the April sightings that I did not include in the earlier account because I couldn't find the right words for it. I was behind the double, watching it from 15 meters as it walked toward the tube, and for a period of perhaps 10 seconds it walked through a patch of morning sunlight, the specific low-angle light of an April morning in that specific gap between the buildings where the sun reaches the pavement at that hour. And it cast a shadow. This should not be notable. Of course it cast a shadow. If it is a physical object, it cast a shadow. The photograph confirmed it was a physical object. But the shadow was mine. I mean, the shadow had the same quality as my shadow. The same proportions, the same specific shape in that light. I know my shadow in that light at that hour because I walked that street at that hour and I have noticed my shadow in that particular patch of morning sun on multiple occasions. And what I was seeing, ahead of me, was my shadow cast by something that was not me. I stood in that patch of sunlight for a moment after it had passed through, and my shadow fell behind me, and I thought, we have the same shadow. This seems obvious in retrospect. Of course it has my shadow. Of course it displaces the same light that I displace. It is the same shape, the same mass, the same form. But standing there, watching the two shadows, mine falling behind me, it already passed, I understood something about the double that the earlier encounters had not given me. It is not an approximation of me. It is not a model or a replica or a reflection. It is me in the way that another instance of a thing is that thing. Not lesser, not other. The same. I stood in the sunlight for a moment. Then I walked to the tube. The photograph, expanded account. I want to go back to the street festival photograph, because I have not described it fully and because the full description matters. The festival was in June. I had gone alone, which is not unusual for me. I regularly attend public events alone, finding them more manageable without the social negotiation of a companion's preferences. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that large cities produce occasionally in summer where the public spaces feel and the city feels briefly like a community rather than a collection of individuals sharing infrastructure. I had been there for approximately 2 hours when I was photographed, though I did not know I was being photographed. Sarah, the colleague, was 30 or 40 meters away in a different section of the crowd, and I was not in her direct sight line. She caught me, and it, in a wide shot taken of the general scene. I have looked at the photograph many hundreds of times. I want to describe what I see. I am visible center left, standing in a slight gap in the crowd where the flow of people around the store had temporarily parted. My face is in three-quarter profile, looking towards something to the left of the frame. I am wearing the green jacket. I appear normal in every visible respect: posture, expression, the specific way I stand when I am in a crowd and looking at something of mild interest. 4 people to my right. The double. It is partially obscured by a man in a grey coat who is between us in the crowd. But the collarbone, the lower face, the profile, these are visible. And the jacket. The same green jacket. What you cannot see in the photograph, but what I have extrapolated from the positioning of both figures and the direction each face is pointing, is this. We are both looking at the same thing. The same point to the left of the frame. Whatever was there, a store, a performer, something I cannot now recover from my memory of that afternoon, both of us were looking at it at the same moment. We were standing 4 people apart in a crowd of hundreds, and we were looking at the same thing at the same time. I have thought about what this means for weeks. I have not arrived at a definitive interpretation. But the feeling it gives me is less like uncanny coincidence and more like the feeling you get when you discover that someone else, a person you have never met, in a different city, in a different life, has been thinking about exactly the problem you have been thinking about. The specific feeling of not being alone in something you thought you were alone in. We were in the same crowd. We were watching the same thing. We were the same person watching the same thing, 4 people apart. I don't know if the double was there because I was there, or whether what draws me to a place also draws it, or whether the distinction between those two things is meaningful at all. The buzzer, my sister's full account. I have given my sister's account in outline. Here is the fuller version, as she told it to me when I arrived home 90 minutes after the call. She had been driving past on her way to an appointment she had in my neighborhood, not planning to stop. She had done this several times since I told her about the double, not looking for it, not in any kind of surveillance, but simply more aware of the area around my building in the way you become aware of the area around a thing you are concerned about. She saw it from the car. Not at a distance, she was driving slowly on the one-way street that runs past my building, looking for a parking space, and it was on the pavement approximately 10 meters ahead of her. She describes the first moment as, "I thought it was you and then I knew it wasn't you." These are not the same moment. The first moment was automatic recognition, the brain pattern matching and producing your face on the figure ahead of me. And then, almost immediately, the correction. But that's not how you stand. That's not your posture. Something about the way it was standing, something she can't fully articulate, that told her immediately that what she was looking at was not her sibling despite looking exactly like her sibling. She pulled into the only available space and watched from the car. It was standing on the pavement outside my building, facing the door. Not pacing, not checking a phone, not doing anything. Standing in the way I have described from my own sightings, the stillness that is not the stillness of a person in repose but the stillness of something that does not have the involuntary movements that animate a living body at rest. Then it moved to the intercom. She describes this motion as too smooth. Not robotic, not mechanical, not wrong in any gross way. But smooth in the specific sense of movement without the micro-hesitations, the small recalibrations, the constant adjustments that human movement contains. As if it had planned the motion entirely before executing it, with no need for the real-time correction that characterizes how people actually move. It pressed my buzzer. She could see it from the car. She did not know which buzzer it had pressed until I confirmed it later, but she counted the sequence and it was the right one, second from the top on the right panel, which corresponds to my flat. It waited. The way a person waits for an intercom. A specific stillness oriented toward the speaker box, the quality of readiness. No answer. I was at work. It pressed again. Waited. No answer. And then, this is the detail she returns to most often when we discuss it, the detail that she found most difficult. It stepped back from the intercom and looked up at the building. Not at a specific window. At the building as a whole. The way you look at a building when you are trying to determine something about it from the outside. The way you look at a building when you are deciding whether to try something else or wait. It stood looking at the building for approximately 30 seconds. Then it walked away around the corner. My sister stayed in the car for several minutes. When she tells this story, and she tells it rarely, only to people who already know the whole account, she returns, every time, to the same moment. Not the buzzer. Not the smoothness of the motion. The moment when it stepped back and looked at the building. She says. It looked like it was looking for you. Not in an aggressive way. Not in a frightening way, exactly. In the way that you look for someone you have arranged to meet and who isn't there yet. In the way that you look for something you are expecting. Patient, she says. It looked patient. The notebook, what it said in full. I said I would read the notebook entry in full. Here is the fuller reading, including the final paragraphs that I did not include in the earlier account. The entry continued beyond the 3 possibilities I described. After the possibility of consolidation, the entry read. I have been sitting with the 3rd possibility for days now. And what I keep finding is that it frightens me in a way that the first 2 do not. But the quality of the fright is specific and I want to name it accurately. It does not frighten me because I think I will be harmed. I am not afraid of harm. The double has had multiple opportunities to harm me if harm were its aim, and it has done nothing of the kind. It frightens me because I do not know which version would persist. Let me be more precise. The consolidation, if that is what happens, would result in one version where there are currently 2. And the version that results, is it me? Is it the double? Is it something that contains both, the way that mixing 2 colors produces a third that neither was and both were? I find I care about this more than I expected to. I thought I was a person with a healthy relationship to the self, not vain, not overly attached to the particular configuration of habits and tendencies and memories that constitutes what I call me. But the possibility of that configuration not surviving the completion gives me access to a feeling I have been largely managing to avoid. The feeling of having something to lose. And then I have to ask. If I care about what I might lose in the consolidation, what is it exactly that I am afraid of losing? The habits. They are arbitrary. I have changed them throughout my life. The memories. They are incomplete and often inaccurate. The tendencies. Many of them are things I have been trying to change. What is left? And here the entry trails off. The handwriting changes slightly, not dramatically, just the difference between a person who is writing in a state of certainty and a person who has written themselves into a question and does not yet have the answer. What is left? It writes again. What would it mean to lose what is left? And then, in slightly larger script, as if the writer wanted to be sure this could be read. I think what is left is the fear. And I think the fear is what the double is coming for. Not to destroy it. To meet it. And then the entry ends. I read this when I found the notebook. I read it again now, months later, from the other side of whatever happened on the night of September 21st. I think the entry was right. The fear was what the double was coming for. Not to destroy it. To meet it, and in meeting it, to make it, not smaller, not less present, not managed away. To make it honest. To make it mine, fully and directly, without the arm's length management that had been the relationship I had with most of the difficult things in my interior life. The consolidation was not the loss of me. The consolidation was me becoming more accurately me. On mirrors, I want to describe the relationship I developed with mirrors during the 10 months of the approach. Before November, mirrors were ordinary objects. I used them for the purposes mirrors are for. I did not think about them beyond that. After the shopping center, mirrors became complicated. Not in the way of childhood superstition, not the sense that the mirror is dangerous, that something in it might come out. The complication was more specifically mine. When I looked in a mirror in the months after the shopping center, I was doing something I had not previously done. I was checking. Looking for the double. Looking to see if what I saw was one face or two. Looking to see if the reflection that looked back was me or the other me. And because I was looking for the wrong thing, I was sometimes not sure what I was seeing. The brain, given the task of looking for a second version of yourself in a mirror, begins to find ambiguity where there was none. The specific half-second of wrongness that I had not experienced before November became a persistent small feature of mirror use. Not every time, but often enough that I began to avoid mirrors in ways I was embarrassed to notice. I mentioned this to Marcus in one of our later conversations, and he said, with the precision that I have always valued in him, "You are not afraid of the mirror. You are afraid of certainty. You are avoiding the mirror because looking in a mirror will confirm either that you are alone or that you are not, and you cannot currently bear either confirmation." He was right. The avoidance was not about the mirror. It was about the information the mirror might carry. In the months after September 22nd, this has resolved. I look in mirrors now and see my face. One face. The face I know. And when I stand in front of a mirror and look at myself, I do something I don't think I was doing before all of this. I actually look. Not the cursory glance of a person checking their appearance before leaving the house. The full attention of a person looking at their own face with genuine interest. With curiosity, even. I have my face back. Or I have it for the first time. I am still working out which. What Thomas wrote in full. I have referred several times to the account by the man I called Thomas, from the forum. I want to reproduce the relevant sections more completely, with the caveat that I am doing so from memory. The post is no longer accessible, either because it was deleted or because the account was deactivated. Thomas wrote, "I want to be clear about something before I describe the final stage. For 9 months I lived with the approach. 9 months of the sightings, the proximity, the photograph, the other evidence. 9 months of telling myself that there was an explanation, and finding that I couldn't hold the explanation, and going back to the experience, and going through the cycle again. I am writing this because I got through it, and I want the people who are where I was to know that getting through it is possible. In the final weeks, the double was present in a way that went beyond sightings. I can't describe this adequately. It was present as a quality of my environment, in rooms, in moments, in the specific dense air of a space that contains something significant. It had been getting closer for months. Now it was close enough that the space between us was not really space anymore. It was more like the space inside a single thing, the distance between two parts of the same structure. On the night of the final contact, I was in my study. I had been trying to work and failing, as I had been failing to work for several weeks. The density in the room was very strong. I turned around and it was there. I am going to describe this as accurately as I can. It was sitting in the chair across from my desk. The chair I use when I read, my reading chair, positioned at an angle to the desk so that the light from the window falls across the page. It was sitting in my reading chair in the way I sit in my reading chair. The specific lean, the angle, the position of the arms. It was looking at me. From perhaps 2 meters. Looking at me with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a very long time and has arrived at the end of the waiting. It said, "I've been trying to reach you for a long time." I said, "I know." It said, "You've been making it very hard." I said, "I know that too." And then we talked. I am not going to reproduce the conversation because the specific content is mine and belongs to me, and I am not going to put it in a forum post. But the nature of the conversation was, it told me things. Not things I didn't know. Things I had known and had been not knowing. The specific information about my own life, about what I was doing, about why I was doing it, about the gap between the life I was living and the life I was living, that I had been managing very efficiently not to examine directly. The conversation lasted approximately 40 minutes. At the end of it, the double was gone. Not gone in the sense of having left. Gone in the sense of having become not present. No longer distinct from the air of the room. I sat in my study for a long time. Then I went to bed and slept for 11 hours. The first uninterrupted sleep I had had in months. In the morning, I was different. Not dramatically. Not in any way visible from the outside. But the things the double had said, the things I had known and been not knowing, were no longer at a managed distance. They were simply present. Facts. Mine to deal with. I dealt with them. I am still dealing with them. I am still here. I am more here than I was. Those are the only things I know for certain. I found Thomas's post in early September, 10 days before my own final contact. I read it many times. I do not think it prepared me for what happened. But it gave me something to hold, the knowledge that someone had been where I was going, had gone further, and was still there on the other side. That was enough. What I did not say in the main account, there are things I did not include in the main account. Some because they were too personal to share, some because I could not find adequate language, some because I was not certain enough of them to commit to the record. I want to include one here. On the night of September 21st, lying in the dark with the double in the corner of the room, what I described as stopping the maintenance of the distance, the letting go of the arm's length management, was accompanied by something I have not found in any other account and which may be specific to my own experience. A sound. Not heard with the ears. Heard in the way that certain things are heard, felt as much as heard, registered in a register that is not quite sensory. A sound that was at the frequency of something fundamental. Something that was my voice and the double's voice at once, producing a single tone that was the two of us, the two versions, coming into the same frequency for the first time. Not a dramatic sound. Not musical. A single, sustained tone that lasted perhaps 3 seconds and then resolved into silence. And in the silence that followed, the density in the room changed. The thick, directed quality that I had been living with for weeks, the pressure that came from proximity to something that needed to be close, lifted. Not entirely. Not immediately. But it shifted, in the way that pressure shifts when a door is opened into a room that has been sealed. Something that had been pressing found the opening it had been pressing toward. 3 seconds. And then the ordinary silence of 3 I lay there for a long time. Then I fell asleep. In the morning, the room was the room. Ordinary morning light. The notebook back in the drawer. I went to the window. No double on the street. Only the autumn light on the plane trees, and a person walking a dog, and a car parked half on the curb. And my own face in the window's reflection. Looking back at me. Just one. A final note: I have been asked, by the people who know this account, whether I am glad it happened. The question deserves a careful answer. I am glad it happened in the way that I am glad about other difficult things that turn out to be necessary, the specific gladness that comes not from the difficulty itself but from being on the other side of it and understanding that the difficulty was the only path to where you are. I am not glad about the months of bad sleep. I am not glad about the specific quality of dread that accompanied the final weeks of the approach. I am not glad about the 47 seconds at the window or the 1 meter in the kitchen or the specific visceral wrongness of seeing your own face in a crowd and knowing it is not yours. But I am glad about what I am on the other side of those things. The greater proximity to myself. The decisions made. The things that were at a managed distance, brought close. The mirror that shows only one face. I am glad about the one face. I walked around for 10 months with 2 versions of myself. The one I was, and the one that was coming. And the 2 versions wanted the same thing, in the end. To be one thing, present and honest and here. The double did not win. I did not lose. We arrived at the same place from different directions. And the place we arrived at is here. Which is, in the end, the only place there is.